War II. He has been made prisoner by the German army in the north of France. And I was afraid that my father will tell me, no, you won't go to Germany. He told the opposite. He told, yes, my son, please go, the war is over. And it's very important to know, because from time to time we discuss from one country to the other. We are all European of different kind. Of course, Italians are not French, they are not German, they are not Dutch, and they are not Polish or Swedish, but we are European. We cannot forget it. And today, with what we see all around the world, we need to unite and we need to do things together. I'm still waiting because we expect several hundreds, and for the moment, we have only 200. So I will wait a little bit more. And you may see that even if EU has been slow to start, it's perfectly normal. In EU, we are 27 countries. If something is not expected and a new frame has to be created, it takes time. But look at the fact, how long did EU wait to do something in this crisis? 4 weeks, 5 weeks? Nevertheless, during the first weeks, only national states are acting. So EU is ready when it has to play its own role. You have seen how the central bank, the European Central Bank, did play its role. And you have seen that German presidency is coming the 1st of July, and Germany is fully ready to lead us in a comprehensive recovery program. So that's what I was willing to tell you while waiting the start. I will start now because we cannot wait too long. If we wait more, we will derail the entire schedule. I am Professor Glachans, the director of the Florence School of Regulation. I am very happy welcoming you in the joint event, CER and Florence School. This event is part of the EU Sustainable Energy Week 2020. And I will not enter into the topic of the day. It will be made by the head of our gas area, Ilaria Conti, in 2 minutes. What I will do is a word about the school. 3 months ago, we didn't know what
Oops, we lost Jean-Michel.
the school can become, because it was the connection isn't stable.
Now we can hear you, Jean-Michel. Please.
Okay, I'm starting. I'm Professor Glachans, Director of the Florence School of Regulation. I will let Ilaria Conti, Head of Gas at Florence School, introducing the topic. I will only introduce the school, and I will introduce the school with a video because we are in a digital space and we now send digital messages. So Danny, could you send the video showing what Florence School has become? It is strange to say that in the middle of a terrible crisis, health, social, and economic crisis, but us at the school, we have never been so active. We now have 10 to 12,000 users of our website every week. We have more than 2,000 subscribers of our YouTube channel, etc., etc. And it never stops. goes ahead every day, I may say. It's normal because of the COVID crisis and the other crisis, which is the climate one, we need to act, we need to agree on understanding, we need to agree on possible actions, we need to agree on rules inside each country and among our countries in the EU and between EU and the rest of the world. So the fact that our school is alive is only a message of hope, a message of action, and action is what we need in such a terrible crisis. I will stop there and I will give the floor to Ilaria, head of gas area at Florence School, to introduce the topic of the event. Have a good meeting, and of course, I will stay with you.
Many thanks, Jean-Michel. So let's start from sharing the screen. Hope it's visible to everyone. Okay, right. So it's really a pleasure for me to set the scene on this important topic and quite recent debate, the debate on renewable gases. Until 2 or 3 years ago, we had hardly heard about renewable gases. But this debate has entered the European policy debate so importantly, so vehemently, that it has become really important to keep discussing about it and possibly coming to some concrete achievements, particularly looking at the consumer side. And that's what we will do today. Why is this debate important for consumers? For at least two good reasons, I would say. First, to understand what kind of energy supply European citizens will have to accept and buy in the future. And also to be aware, to make everybody aware that the decisions that will be taken in terms of energy policy and regulation in the next months will be likely to have an impact on the speed, on the efficiency, on the reliability, and also on the cost of the energy transition for European consumers. So this said, let's first ask ourselves, why are we talking about renewable gases? And by renewable gases today, here I mean biogas, biomethane, hydrogen, and synthetic gas. And we will see later what their main features are. So we are all aware, very well aware of the targets that we have to meet in 2030. Of course, the CO2 emissions cut and the increase in final energy consumption from renewable energy and energy efficiency. Then we have the European Green Deal aiming at achieving a net zero economy by 2050. And the strategic long-term vision of the European Commission, published a couple of years ago, was seeing the decarbonization of the economy requiring 50% of electrification or more, up to 60%. So the question is, if electrification will be able to cover for about 50 or 60%, what will be the main supply for the rest of the economy by 2050? And that's where a big debate on the future role of gas enters the scene. But it appears more and more clear that gas will play an important role in the decarbonization process, not only as a backup, and natural gas will probably limitedly keep having this important role, but also by contributing with cleaner and cleaner molecules, so the so-called green gas. It all in a sector coupling, sector integration perspective, meaning that gas and electricity will be essential to achieve decarbonization by being more and more interlinked in the future. So there are, of course, a number of studies in support to this debate. Several scenarios have been published, and they see an important scope for renewable gas in this process. You have graphs from the European Commission's long-term strategy and also from the International Energy Agency. But we have to recognize that, in fact, renewable energy is at the moment defined only in the Renewables Directive, in the recast Renewables Directive, RED II, so-called, from 2019. But it defines renewable energy only, it restricts the definition of renewable energy only until a certain type of renewable energy sources, where only biogas basically appears as a what we would call green gas. Biogas is defined as gaseous fuels produced from biomass, but only in the recital, in recital 59, we see also a mention of biomethane and hydrogen. In fact, we can distinguish quite broadly between two categories of green gas, the so-called renewable gases and the so-called low carbon or decarbonized gases. The first are coming from organic origin, let's say, and the second type come from fossil fuels. But as you can see, while the molecule is basically either hydrogen or methane, so there is a sort of consistency that the resulting molecule is only hydrogen or methane or a blend between the two. Very different are the consequences, for example, on the gas infrastructure, on the demand side, and also the decarbonization potential. We can say that, of course, in this table, the commercial aspect doesn't enter. We are here classifying gases only based on their on the physics of and all the processes by which they are produced. If we take a look at the product and the processes, we see that there is a big diversity. We have biomethane, for example, that can be produced through various processes. In this case, you have in the first graph the anaerobic digestion process, which is the most common one, and where basically starting from different feedstock, so you have livestock waste, crops waste, and food waste, through an anaerobic digester, you obtain biogas and digestate. And biogas can be immediately used for a limited number of purposes, local exploitation, I would say. And then after becoming biomethane with a sort of cleaning process, which is called upgrade, it can enter the traditional, the existing gas infrastructure and be used as a fuel or enter directly the gas grid. In the picture below, there is instead a thermal gasification process by which you still obtain biomethane, but then you see that we start from a different type of feedstock. And this is definitely something that policy has to take into account. Here you have instead a power to gas process, and we can see that through power to gas we can produce both green hydrogen and synthetic methane. So how does it work? After renewable electricity, often curtailed renewable electricity which is abundant and would be curtailed, and with the aid of an electrolyzer, we are able to produce green hydrogen, which has a different number of uses. It can be used for power industry, transport, and directly used in buildings. But with a process, again, with the methanation, green hydrogen can again be fit for purpose to enter the existing gas grid. So it appears quite clear that after all these studies, after all this debate, there would be a need for a taxonomy of green gases. What is a taxonomy? From Greek, taxonomy is the discipline of classification. So the first question to ask is, which gases do we want to classify? By which parameters, based on which parameters, what are the important parameters that we think would help us classifying these gases, and which methodology should we use? All of these, first of all, to make sure that when we speak about these gases, we exactly mean the same things, that there is no confusion, and also, as a consequence, to attribute through words, through terminology, value in environmental, commercial, and financial terms to these gases. As you can understand, all of this then has a direct impact on any regulation and any market rule. But which issues are we trying to solve? Well, as I said, it's not really clear when someone says decarbonized gas, what he or she exactly means. And this is because the same type of gas can be obtained through several processes, and as we saw, and also from different origin, which can be fossil or non-fossil. And also, gas which is obtained from non-fossil origin is not necessarily CO2 free. So, for example, biogas is not necessarily CO2 free. It really depends on the process which leads to the final product. Synthetic gas includes methane, but it can be made also starting from renewable hydrogen and with no greenhouse gases emitted during the process. And if you take a look to 3 identical molecules of hydrogen, they can be obtained from, for example, from biomass, which is 100% non-fossil with the emission of greenhouse gases, from gas with almost no greenhouse gases emissions, and that's the case, for example, of pyrolysis, and from coal with greenhouse gases emissions, and that's the case of gray hydrogen without carbon capture and storage. The debate is quite complex, and in these years we came up, some people came up with a colorful description of hydrogen, for example, which is not a unique, let's say, a homogeneous product. So we heard talking about green hydrogen, blue hydrogen, when it is produced with carbon capture and storage starting from fossil fuels, gray hydrogen, as I just said, without this technology. But lately, even turquoise hydrogen, it's called, what is produced from pyrolysis. And I even heard yellow or pink hydrogen, when gas is produced via pyrolysis or electrolysis, but using nuclear electricity. Florence School of Regulation has also come up with its own taxonomy proposal. I will not go into the details today. If you want, we have also some publications about it. But just to let you know that for us, the 2 key parameters to define a type of gas are its green value, so the origin, whether fossil or non-fossil, and whether greenhouse gases emissions come along in the process, in the production process. Also, we think that its usability is important. So to what extent this gas is compatible with the existing gas infrastructure. Based on this taxonomy, we came up with 4 big categories for gas: alpha, beta, gamma, and delta. And just to conclude, the taxonomy debate is very much still open. Our proposal is not the only one, of course. There are a number of proposals coming from the electricity, from the gas industry, and from civil society. Also, there is now an agreed taxonomy for sustainable finance coming at European level regarding sustainable investments. What we can expect is perhaps a clarification from the European Commission in the next legislative steps. And there's a big waiting for the upcoming hydrogen strategic outlook and the smart sector integration strategy, which should be published before the summer, probably in the next couple of weeks. Although we will probably see much more clarity only in the course of next year with the expected legislative package. Thank you very much for your attention.
So, good morning, everybody. I am very pleased to be here with you and our Florence School, the AEB and the CR friends, to discuss this very important issue during this special week. So we are in the EU Sustainable Energy Week, and we are starting with this webinar on understanding renewable gas, hydrogen, and power to gas, and empowering consumers to make informed choices. Thank you, Ilaria, for sharing with us the taxonomy issue. that we are discussing it since the beginning of this year. And we have now more clarity regarding the several options on renewable gases. What are they, and how we might classify them, taking into account their climate impact or benefits. Thank you very much. And I have also to say that we are all experiencing these last months severe constraints, but as Michel shared with us and expressed it, we also have benefits from the current situation in professional context. And this webinar is a good example, because we might reach indeed a very wide audience, and we have a lot of people in the room, more than 300 people in the room, virtually speaking, of course, in this virtual room. And thanks to these online webinars, we are making much more democratic these discussions and exchange of knowledge. And I am very glad to see that we have indeed a huge participants in this webinar. I think that we should have in the screen two questions, two polls, yes. And so I kindly invite all the participants to answer these two questions. So the first question is to know, please tell us which type of organization you represent, if government, national, state, or local authorities, industry and business, consulting, academia, NGO, and civil society. And then we have question 2. How much are familiar with the topic of the webinar? Please answer if I have some notions, I am an expert on topic or not familiar. And then at the end, we will come back to that. The current crisis has reinforced the importance of the energetic transition towards achieving our climate goals and of implementing a sustainable recovery plan for our economy. And again, as said by Jean-Michel and Ilaria, we are here today to consider what place there can be for renewable gases. And so here we have the answer. Yeah. So 75% have some notions. Okay, so I see that we have experienced audience with us. And I was saying that we, under this context, we have to provide consumers with clear information to help them make informed decisions about their energy consumption and the choice of energy carriers available to them. This is a huge challenge that we have in front of us. Also, to the increased electrification of economic activities will surely lead to a reduction in the use of unabated natural gas by consumers in short term. Natural gas, we have to highlight that natural gas still provides essential service such as heating and also serving as a feedstock for various industries. Renewable gas sources like hydrogen and the power to gases systems have the potential to play an important role in decarbonizing the gas sector, be it in our homes, heating or cooking, transport, industry, or even as a storage and flexibility solution in addition to electric batteries, namely when we are addressing long-term needs, long-term frequency changes. They should be part of a whole system approach that, as we are discussing now at the EU level, so we are discussing the integrated energy system, which represents an integration of energy carriers and also of sector of activities. So in the future, the management of the energy needs of our society will mostly based on a local perspective, local level, handled by communities, renewable energy, and taking into account all the energy carriers together with the sector activities like mobility, industry needs, services, and residential consumers. So we are starting discussing that, and of course, these renewable gases, decarbonized gas, will play an important role on that discussion. And as we know also, consumer choices and attitudes can largely contribute to propelling the process forward. To do this, consumers require transparent and reliable information on the carbon and environmental footprints of products and services. The priority of the NRA's joint work is to improve outcomes for consumers in both the short and long term, as well to help to ensure a balance between decarbonization and market development. As we say in CR3D strategy, we should promote decarbonization at least cost, and of course in the interest of consumers. Now I will give the floor to the speakers. We have with us excellent speakers, and to discuss these issues, first, addressing the potential of biogas as a part of a long-run decarbonization effort. We have Susanna, Secretary General of the European Biogas Association since 2016, having first joined the organization as a policy advisor in 2012. Since 2010, she has worked as an energy advocate in Brussels, representing in European institutions. She is responsible for various policy topics related to the European biogas industry. She holds a master's degree in European Studies from the Ruhr University of Bochum and a bachelor from the University of Helsinki. Please, Susanna, the floor is yours for a period of 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. Also, just to present briefly my organization, the European Biogas Association, EBA, is a Brussels-based association founded in 2009 to promote renewable gases and representing the entire supply chain of biogas and biomethane. And then just to answer the question of whether biogas can really be part of a long-run decarbonization effort of the European Union, my answer is, of course, yes. Biogas will be part of a long-run decarbonization effort. And I want to underline the fact that makes biogas so unique. So these are all the positive externalities that come along the renewable gas production. So for example, biogas can help farmers to make the transition to more sustainable practices, and it brings along employment and innovation to rural areas. In urban areas instead, biogas production can help to, for example, recycle bio-waste from households and restaurants. And then this biogas that is produced from the waste can be used, for example, to fuel urban garbage trucks and improving thereby air quality and, for example, reducing also noise pollution as gas is more silent than diesel. And then on the energy side, biomethane is also a very flexible option, as already mentioned by Ilaria. It can be used in all applications where natural gas is used nowadays. Or you could also, for example, produce peak load electricity from biogas to make the power supply more flexible. Biogas and biomethane do not require any changes in the existing infrastructure, so for example in the gas grid, which is also a big benefit when taking the entire system approach. But of course, also the gas grid must be made fit for more decentralized gas production and supply in the future. And then finally, the production potential is also huge. Of course, there are limits as biogas and biomethane are produced from biomass, but still compared to the current situation, there is a way to go. So according to many neutral studies that have been produced recently on renewable gases, also estimating the potential of biomethane, it is in Europe around 2015, somewhere around 100 billion cubic meters, or even above. So even though it cannot replace the entire natural gas consumption, which is somewhere around 400, 450 BCM today, of course, we will need also other solutions like hydrogen above all, but biogas and biomethane will definitely need to play a role to decarbonize not only energy, but also agriculture and our waste management. Thank you.
Thank you, Susanna. Then I think we should go to the next speaker for Susanna's contribution. So Phil is the Secretary General of the Association of Issuing Bodies and the co-creator of the European Energy Certificate System. And Phil will discuss the implementation of RED II and the challenges that follow for the GEO system. The Association of Issuing Bodies was formed following a successful test of a voluntary certificate system, the REX, further developing into the European Energy Certificate System, the guarantees of origin systems. Its members are the competent bodies for the administration of GEO schemes in 22 EU member states, plus Norway and Switzerland. Please, Phil, the floor is yours for a period of 5 minutes.
Thank you very much indeed, Pedro. Greetings from the UK, which for the time being is part of the European Union. Thanks for inviting me to speak. I've been Secretary General now since 2001, and I will be standing aside for a successor next month who will be announced publicly in the next week or two. It's been a pretty exciting 20 years, and I hope the next decade continues in this manner as the AIB moves from its traditional base in electricity into gases. As Pedro mentioned, the AIB is a not-for-profit association of competent bodies appointed by government to administer guarantee of origin schemes. We're registered in Brussels and we're supported by a virtual office of people in Belgium, UK, Germany, Finland. The tradition of remote working has put us in a good position to rise to the challenges of COVID-19, which has been an unexpected benefit. We have 29 members now in 26 countries. As of last week, we expanded another 2 countries, Portugal and Latvia. And these are all the member states of the European Union, the EEA, and the contracting parties to the energy community. And between them, the members transfer more than 600 million 1 megawatt-hour guarantees of origin every year, and that's growing by about 10%. We were founded in 2001 after a 2-year test of the concept of voluntary certificates for electricity, which was stimulated by producers looking for more income, suppliers wanting to differentiate their product as a competitive edge, and consumers simply wanting choice and something to put on their CSR reports. And that continual demand from consumers has risen over the period. In 2004, we added renewable energy guarantees of origin and high-efficient cogeneration guarantees of origin to our portfolio, and we wound up the original REC certificate scheme in 2015. So it is all now guarantees of origin under EU law. The European Energy Certificate System, EECS, has evolved since 1999 and it continues to mature. The concept allows guarantees of origin to represent the energy carried initially by electricity, but also now by gas. Indeed, we agreed the foundation of the gas scheme last November, and we're now, during the course of the year, developing the detail and putting the systems infrastructure in place. So we should hopefully sometime next year be able to commence moving guarantees of origin for gas through the system. The energy can come from renewable, fossil or nuclear sources, and guarantees of origin representing all of these are currently being issued. To facilitate simple, reliable economic transfers of guarantees of origin between national registries, we've developed for more than a decade a thing called the Hub, which is a single electronic point of contact for registries, and it facilitates transfer and monitoring of guarantees of origin, storage of common data, and supports dispute resolution. The Hub has made it a lot easier for each registry to connect to every other registry with one single plug and play. And we've had to overcome a lot of challenges. Prevention of double counting was the prime mover to get us going on this, and also ensuring that once you issue a guarantee of origin, it doesn't change until it arrives at the consumer. And that's vital for consumer confidence. Then we had to define all the details of the data carried by guarantees of origin. When you say location, do you mean a postcode? Do you mean an address? Or is a country enough? Those sort of things had to be defined, along with the purpose of a guarantee of origin. Right in the beginning, 1999, the idea was guarantees of origin might be used for target counting. Well, that didn't happen. Indeed, they're used for disclosure these days. But when we look at RED II, Renewable Energy Directive, we see that ideas of target counting and potentially even financial support are coming back in, and there's even a relationship with sustainability certificates. So do we have a guarantee of origin that represents all of these? I would think not, but maybe they all get conveyed together on the same electronic document. That could happen. And it's that area that we're looking at. How do these all interrelate? Then there's the calculation of the residual mix, which we've been doing now for about 4 or 5 years. That's for supply, which isn't evidenced by guarantees of origin. What are consumers getting? And finally, there's the quality assurance of both AIB operations and the operations of its members. Now, the beginning of its life, the AIB was a simple commercial system. Decision making was pretty simple, and the system evolved quickly. Along came the Renewable Energy Directive, and that brought other parties into the decision-making process. So we now have ministries and the Commission and other formal institutions, such as the standards body CEN-CENELEC, which has made decision-making a little bit more complex, but a lot more thorough. When a competent body applies to join the AIB, we audit them. We repeat that when their systems change, and then every 3 years they're audited for compliance. And that makes sure that the system is operating to the best quality. The consideration of change is according to a set process, and usually a simple issue can get solved in 2 or 3 months, but it can take longer for a more complex issue like how do we deal with pump storage. Member consensus is devolved to decision-making expert groups, and votes are allocated according to transfer activity. And that way we get some reflection of the size of countries. RED II has introduced compliance for the CEN-CENELEC standard 16325, which is all about guarantees of origin. The initial version of the standard was based on EECS, but it's got to be revised now to meet the requirements of RED II. And in particular, that makes use of guarantees of origin mandatory for disclosure of energy source, and it introduces guarantees of origin for hydrogen and hydrocarbon gases, as well as electricity and heating and cooling. And the process is now in place within CEN, and we're deeply involved in that, reviewing and revising the standards. Working groups are currently looking at each aspect of it. And they're advised by the EU Commission FASCO project, which is providing detailed technical advice on every aspect of the directive relating to guarantees of origin. FASCO is led by our expert in sector coupling, and we expect the new standard to be adopted early in about 2021. So thank you very much indeed. And back to you, Pedro.
Thank you very much, Phil. And well, now at the end, with the help of Ilaria, we have already a lot of questions here in the screen, but we will answer them. Also, some of them are being answered by the speakers of this webinar. Thank you, Phil, for your presentation and intervention. And now to discuss the role of the hydrogen markets toward decarbonization, we have Mirella Athanasiou, Head of Unit of Operations and Communications in the Fuel Cells and Hydrogen Joint Undertaking since 2016, a public-private partnership between the European industry and research community and European Commission. So Mirella holds a Master Science in Chemical Engineering, Material Science, and also another Master Science in Economics and Cybernetics. She has a strong background in research in the energy sector in Romania. She joins the FCHJU, so the Fuel Cell and Hydrogen Joint Undertaking, and European Commission as a Senior Project Manager and Research Program Officer. Please, Mirella, the floor is yours for a period of 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Pedro, for the nice introduction. I'm really happy to be part of this discussion today. I'll try to make it in the 5 minutes. I'll do my best. Of course, I cannot talk or start talking about renewable gases or hydrogen in particular without just shortly introducing my organization. You already said a few words, Pedro, and thank you for that. We are working on research and innovation on fuel cell and hydrogen since more than 12 years now, from 2008. The joint undertaking between the European Commission and the industry, hydrogen industry, was formed. We have more than 250, almost 300 projects supported on hydrogen and fuel cells. We have managed to bring to the commercial stage different products like cars, buses, the hydrogen refilling infrastructure, and on the energy side, micro-CHP or electrolyzers. We have mainly done from research to technology validation, but we have also tested different business models or routes to the market for the different products. In general, when talking about hydrogen and hydrogen production, we have only supported projects on green hydrogen, but we have also acknowledged that the work probably has to be in all the types of hydrogen production routes. And when talking about feedback to policy through our projects, but through our different other measures, we have also started since 2014 to work on the so-called Certify by now. You probably have all heard about Certify. And we have designed 2 types of labels, green and low carbon hydrogen through the Certify project. And then in the second phase, towards 2017, we have also elaborated different procedures for guarantees of origin issuing, transfer, and cancellation, and also tested to a mean of a pilot. In that pilot, more than 76,000 guarantees of origins were issued and cancelled. The 4 pilots were one here in Colruyt in Belgium, where renewable sources was coupled with an electrolysis and hydrogen produced. Another one in Port Jérôme in France, at the location of Air Liquide, where a steam methane reformer was connected to carbon capture and utilization. The third one was at the chlor-alkali plant of AkzoNobel Nouryon, ex-AkzoNobel Nouryon. And the 4th one was in Germany, at the location where hydrogen was produced through electrolysis and then either injected directly into the natural gas grid or methanation, synthetic methane was produced. Also, as a result of the pilot, some of the guarantees of origin were already cancelled through either hydrogen mobility in Deutschland or the Transport for London, for example. What we learned, it is very clear that it's important to have a uniform approach when characterizing hydrogen as a product. Meaning we have to agree on a common data sheet for hydrogen to enable consumer choice, like you mentioned at the beginning already, but most importantly on agreeing on a methodology for the calculation of the inputs to this data sheet. We've done a lot of work. Like I said, I mentioned 2014, 2017. So for some years already together with our members, both European Commission and also the hydrogen industry. And we have also developed a methodology for calculating greenhouse gases emission, which has been agreed within a stakeholder forum. Our stakeholder forum now has hundreds of participants. And because of that, and in strong collaboration with both our members, European Commission and our industry association, we have decided to continue this work, to learn, to also align the methodology of GHG emission calculation with the methodology of the European Commission in implementing RED II. And we have just recently published a tender, I believe the deadline is this week, to support further the establishment of an independent and self-sustainable community, a stakeholder platform that will deal with all hydrogen certification issues, both guarantees of origin, but also target compliance, to support and accelerate the establishment of harmonized and mutually recognized guarantees of origin schemes for renewable and non-renewable hydrogen across member states, while ensuring compliance with Article 19 of RED II, and also, if possible, to support the design of a hydrogen certification system that will be able to demonstrate compliance with the targets of RED II on the share of renewables following the specific requirements that are applicable in each case, especially when we talk about non-renewable renewable gases from non-biological origins when compliance with the targets for other sectors such transportation. So with that, keeping that in mind, all the work, like I mentioned already, done in the last 6 years, we would like to continue. And of course, we will have to work together with all of you. Yes, I'm looking forward to the discussion today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mirella, for your intervention. And now, last but not least, we have Kostas Stamatis from the European Commission. So Kostas is a policy officer at the Directorate General for Energy of the European Commission. Mr. Stamatis works at the European Commission in DG Energy as a policy officer since 2012, dealing with retail markets and networks in electricity and gas. He was involved in preparation of the clean energy package and in the new electricity market design, focusing on issues related to distribution networks and DCO, so clearly on centralized environment, where the forest belongs to the distribution. He holds a master's degree in banking and finance and a background in the Greek energy regulator, working on topics related to the electricity and gas markets, as well as in financial sectors in the areas of corporate finance and investment banking. Please, Kostas, the floor is yours for a period of 5 minutes also.
Okay, good morning. Thank you, Pedro. Good morning to all the participants. Thanks also to the previous speakers and Ilaria for setting nicely the scene and giving all these details. So, as you said, I'm working at DG Energy in the retail markets unit. Of course, there is a number of units in our DG which are cooperating on the topic of gas, the wholesale markets unit as well, the renewables unit, etc. So it's not only the retail markets unit, of course, and of course we are cooperating also with the relevant agencies and with FCH in the case of Horizon 20, of hydrogen, and with Mirella, of course, into identifying best practices and way forward for renewable gases and hydrogen. From my part, I will give you, let's say, I will try to give you a part of our thinking on the renewable and the decarbonized gases, how we see from our side, and give you a little bit the policy context. So indeed, under the European Green Deal strategy, we are looking right now to set more ambitious greenhouse gas reduction targets already for 2030, as you know, from 40% to go up to 50 or 55%. And right now, we are in a process of identifying, let's say, and assessing the impact of these new targets. And this, of course, will call for a rapid transformation of our energy system, and in this case, the decarbonization of the gas sector. And always what we are looking for is to go through the more cost-effective and efficient pathway toward this objective. Today, gaseous energy consumption amounts to around 25% of the total EU energy consumption, with natural gas, of course, having the biggest share, accounting for 96% of the total consumption of gaseous energy. So this leaves, for the time being, a tiny, I would say, 4% for other type of gases. According to the long-term strategy, gaseous energy will continue to represent an important share of the EU's overall energy mix in 2050, close to 20% in some scenarios. This, of course, will depend on a number of factors, such as the technological developments in the field, and especially Mirella mentioned some technological developments in the case of hydrogen are very important for the efficient and cost-effective uptake of these technologies. So in this context, it is expected that the renewable and decarbonized gases, in particular biomethane and hydrogen, will increasingly contribute to the clean energy transition and decarbonization, as well as to security of supply. Especially the production of hydrogen from renewable electricity offers an opportunity for fostering smart sector integration, which of course is also an objective in the European Green Deal strategy. And in particular, the coupling of electricity and gas sectors. It is also worth noting, and Pedro mentioned a little bit in the beginning my background. So I think it's worth mentioning that we see the development of decentralized gas production from various sources to change also the ecosystem, I would say, of the gas sector. So we may see in the future that the gas system will shift from a centralized system to a more, which is the case, of course, today, to a more decentralized one. And therefore, distribution and local level will then gain importance and play an increasing role in the future. So the question, I would say, for us that we are looking during the past, I would say, 2 or 3 years, is how to support the development of renewable and decarbonized gases and anticipate, of course, changes in the system as the one I just mentioned. Already, I think, 2 or 3 panelists referred to the renewable energy directive, the RED II, as we call it. And indeed, RED II contains provisions which support the development already of sustainable renewable gas, biogas, and hydrogen in a number of ways. In this context, the directive extends guarantees of oranges currently in place for renewable electricity and renewable heating and cooling to cover all type of renewable energy, including renewable gas, which of course is expected to facilitate the production of renewable gas. And we already see from some intervention that there's a lot of work being done in this front. Now, looking forward, and I will say what we expect to come with, let's say, what is the thinking of some future legislative initiatives. One of the key objectives is, of course, to facilitate and enable the uptake of renewable and decarbonized gases in our energy system by creating a suitable regulatory framework at EU and national level. And in this context, emphasis should be put on 4 points, I would say, but not only them. Ensuring, the first one is to ensure level playing field for emerging technologies and support market-based solutions, contribute to smart energy system integration and to a sustainable economy as envisaged in the European Green Deal. And finding, it's also important to find no regret infrastructure options for the future that will foster sector integration and accommodate new form of gas, such as I mentioned, biomethane, hydrogen, synthetic methane. And here, maybe I can refer a little bit in the context of the current pandemic crisis that, as has been confirmed by President von der Leyen and the Vice President Timmermans, that Europe should insist in the long term to invest in solutions, in innovative solutions, not only look to relieve, let's say, the economic pressure in the short term, but also look at the long term and invest in innovative technologies that will bring us closer to the 2050 objective. And finally, we need to put emphasis on opportunities and options which facilitate resources at a local level and bring direct benefit to consumers. Thank you.
Thank you, Kostas, for your excellent intervention. So we had the opportunity to assist to 4 excellent interventions. Susanna Fugger mentioned the potential of biogas in this new environment. Phil Moody, besides other aspects, I highlighted here the huge challenges for the issuing of guarantees of origin to renewable gas under the framework of RED II. So this is really an issue now. And Mirella shared with us several hydrogen pilot projects and the challenges to label these new decarbonized gases that are being produced. And Kostas, beside others, shared with us the European Commission perspective on renewable gases contributing to the decarbonization of our society, and quite important, in a resilient way, ensuring security of supply. So besides other aspects, I point out those. And now, before we open the floor for discussion, I think Ilaria has a quick poll for us to answer, and it could well spark some discussions between us all. Ilaria, please.
Sure. While we are waiting for Daniela to upload this little poll that we prepared just to break the ice, voila, here we are already. This is just to start the Q&A session. So we want to engage you in this discussion. Please feel free to keep asking questions to the panel. But meanwhile, we would like to have your own views on one of the main topics we are discussing today. So in your opinion, the main barrier to a broad use of renewable gas, as we described, would be the renewable electricity price, the CO2 price, the conflict between traditional use of food or water versus their use as a fuel. You know, it's always a difficult choice. The taxonomy, which is still too unclear, or taxations, levies on energy. Please vote, and then we will comment the results. I think we have approximately 260 participants. So we want to see a good number of replies, please. Okay, and here we are with the results. So most of you think that CO2 price will be determinant in facilitating the development of renewable gas. And this is, I would say, something I hear quite often in conferences and debates. But of course, also the renewable electricity price, which will have an impact on some technologies such as electrolyzers, and they use the processing of green hydrogen. 20% thinks that taxation levies on energy will play a role, and taxonomy as well, 17%, and only 10% of you sees a potential conflict in the use of food and water as sources to produce energy. Very interesting, quite varied results. Pedro, I give the floor back to you and to anyone who would like to comment on these results.
Thank you, Ilaria. And I give the floor to the speakers. What you think? So it seems that in a way, the results are similar. Identifying that CO2 price, it's more relevant, but we have also renewable electricity price and also taxations and levies. And well, I think those issues are really being discussed. So for instance, on power to gas technologies, taxations and levies on energy might make the difference in order to ensuring a proper development and enhancement of those type of technologies. At CR, we are discussing that issues, and also tarification. What type of tariffs should be applied to those power to gas technology in order to avoid the duplication of the application of tariffs. And then the other issue, I think it's quite important, of course, is CO2, because it gives it might give higher value to this type of new technology, and of course, renewable price, the power price, because the power price is an input of this new technology. So the three main concerns, I totally agree with them, but please, I want to give the floor to the speakers to have.
Shall I start?
Yes, please, Susanna.
Thank you. So I actually do agree the CO2 price, of course, should be much higher. It is increasing already, but it should get much higher in order to make a level playing field between fossil and renewable fuels. So yes, that's one of the main reasons and barriers, but there are also a couple of others. For example, in my view, there is no really level playing field between renewable energy sources either. So no technology neutrality, because indeed, in our view, we need all sustainable solutions to reach carbon neutrality. But at the moment, it seems when looking, for example, at the taxonomy report of the tech that only certain solutions like electric vehicles are promoted, even though they take only the tailpipe emissions into account. So that's not really sure whether that's actually contributing to decarbonization. When looking at the LCA, bio-CNG can actually reach higher emission savings. So taxonomy and CO2 price, I would definitely agree on them, but there are also then a few others. For example, in our sector, we need, of course, also a European biomethane market that is, at the moment, the market is very national, but yeah, well, we can go into those details maybe later or another opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Susanna. Thank you, Mirella. Do you want to add?
Yeah, of course I will only comment on the hydrogen side because that's where I'm coming from. Of course, I would agree with the taxonomy part. I know that the Commission has made a lot of progress lately with the last report published now in June on the taxonomy, but we've seen already from the beginning from Ilaria that when we talk about different types of hydrogen, I personally don't like to categorize it by color. I don't think that it's the perfect way to do it. I mentioned already we have two types of labels that should be green and low carbon. If we really want, we can call it clean instead of low carbon, because this is the last one, the last wording we are using right now. But we should not get in this color discussions unless we have behind there's a clear methodology and what is the content of the CO2 that we have behind. And the methodology on how to calculate that should be very clear. It has to take into account the whole LCA, like Susanna mentioned. There is still discussion ongoing on how do we consider the footprint of the electricity when we talk about hydrogen produced with electrolysis. I know that also European Commission is now working with the GRC, with the Joint Research Center, to establish a methodology on that. There is still a lot of work to be done, but again, in my opinion, I believe until these issues are not clarified, so that we all speak the same language, I believe we will still discuss right now. So to me, this is the most important issue to be addressed on a short term, the taxonomy.
Thank you, Mirella. And Phil, please, do you have comments regarding?
Well, I always say that the AIB is effectively the truckers. We're trying to move the guarantees of origin around Europe, and we're not too concerned about what's in the back of the lorry. But there were two lessons that we did learn from electricity. One of them is that policy uncertainty is a real problem, and that remains the case in every area. The more policy uncertainty you can get, the more harmonization of national markets you can get, the better. And so we don't have something happening in Germany, which means that their guarantees of origin cannot be exported to Spain or vice versa. We have one set of rules for everybody, then everyone knows where they are. But the other thing we learned, I think, is actually in some ways more important. With electricity, we decided to just do it. Let's not worry about the fine points, the details. Let's prove the market exists, and then we'll refine it over time. And it's become a very refined market now. But at the outset, it was just do it, find out whether it works, and learn some lessons. And that would be my lesson to the gas industry. Try not to get 100% right, because then, you know, the excellent becomes the enemy of the good. Just try and get it going, and then we make the changes.
Thank you, Phil. I see indeed that the comments of the first three speakers are quite aligned. So Susanna mentioned the challenge of the CO2 price. Mirella, the taxonomy, in order to ensure that the carbonized gas are not discriminated in this environment, we have to have a proper taxonomy in order to get an appropriate CO2 value to those decarbonized gas. And I still think Phil also is quite aligned, because in order to, we have to have a policy certainty regarding the the decisions, the policy decisions on all of those issues. And so, Costas, please, can you head on that, please?
Yes, I think it's a difficult topic to provide a definite answer. I think that I agree with the rest of the panelists. For me, it is important on a macro level, let's say, to reflect rightly the costs, and in this case, to reflect in a right way the cost of CO2 in order to incentivize the use of renewable and decarbonized gases. So to let the market, let's say, then decide what kind of options will follow. And also the renewable electricity price is also important, not only in terms of producing, for instance, green gas, but also in the long term of having a very low priced alternative to gas. But of course, we see right now, and this is what we say, is that possibly we will need the gas system to support the electricity system. So it will not be enough for the electricity system to supply all this quantity of energy to the energy system. So it will need also the gas system to provide these quantities to consumers. And of course, gas has some comparative advantage in specific uses. So we may see that electric vehicles will be the choice for the future, but for long distances, distance traveling or transportation, might be the gas that will be the option, or the hydrogen in this case. So I would say that these are two important elements for me in order to incentivize at a macro level, in a way, the use of renewable gases. And then, of course, as the other panelists said, the policy framework in general, and this includes also taxonomy definitions, levies and taxes would be included under this policy framework. Is very important. Phil said that policy uncertainty it might be a barrier. I agree to this, and I think we also agree in DG Energy that we need to have a clear view what will be let's say, the policy for the future. Of course, we need to take a more step-by-step approach in a way that currently we are talking about markets that do not exist, or technologies that they are still, let's say, try to prove themselves. But from our side, as I said, we try to be at least technology neutral and try to create a level playing field for all technologies and all resources in the energy system. So yes, this is more or less from my side. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Costas, for comment also. And Ilaria, I think we have another question to the audience. No?
I'm not sure we have, no. Maybe though I can briefly comment as well on the results, just by saying that yes, I also see here in the chat, in the webinar chat, some more inputs to the debate, and also some suggestions for more options for the poll are coming through, and I think we will take them into account. But I agree with what most of the speakers already said, that it is important to create a market for sure. So, and the absence of a real demand and supply mechanism is still missing for renewable gases. But that's exactly where I think that regulation can help and can play a role. So, as we know, when there are objectives that cannot be met simply by market rules, then regulation has to step in and to intervene. And this is what helped achieving the renewable electricity targets nowadays. So we have to take this into account, of course, learning from the past, from possible mistakes, but I think there is now a clear need for some intervention if we want to facilitate the development of the so-called renewable gases. Then I was pleasantly surprised about 17% choosing taxonomy, because when I started looking into this, to me it sounded really like a very theoretical discussion. In Italian we have an expression, it's about debating, it's debating about the gender of angels, are they male or female, but at the end of the day, who cares? So it's absolutely not like that. So this is a very important topic, because as I'm sure many of the attendees realized, it has a direct impact on the way people think. Even the average European citizens have the right to know what they are supplied, if the energy supply they have is green, to what extent it is green, and where it comes from, etc., etc. And of course, tremendous commercial impact on the market prices and so on. That's my small comment.
Minutes. So I think we can also look to the questions that are in the QA panel and choose some of them. So some of them, those questions are directly addressed to the speakers. I wonder if any of you wants to ask. For instance, the first one is for Phil. Do you want to answer that question, Phil?
I have a nasty feeling this is a rather bitter chalice, but I will try to take it up. The AIB does not have a policy position on this, nor does it have policy positions on anything other than things that make the system work properly. That's the important thing to understand. AIB is apolitical, and that's deeply embedded in the way that we do business. There are some countries who believe that when the society has paid for a renewable plant, then society should be the people who benefit from that plant. There are other people who take a wider, more European view. It depends on member states. The AIB will support either way of doing it. We have no views on that whatsoever. So sorry, I cannot add anything further than that we are an enabler, we're a facilitator, we are not somebody who drives this sort of discussion, but we're quite happy to talk about it.
Thank you, Phil, for clarifying that. Maybe Susanna can go for the second questions regarding the difference of biomethane prices, production costs, compared with natural gas production costs. How do you want to make it more competitive?
Well, yes, the CO2 price was already mentioned. I think this is the key aspect there. But of course, the industry, biomethane industry, will also need to play its role. And at the moment, yeah, indeed, it is much more expensive, of course, as most renewable energies are expensive than the fossil alternatives. But the price, the production price will go down in the future. There are several studies on that. I would not like to name any price now for the future, as there are different results. But thanks to improved efficiency, also partly to economies of scale, the price will go down, and also maybe in the future we will be able to better monetize the positive externalities. For example, starting by introducing gate fees across Europe to in order when biogas is produced from bio-waste. And this is also one of the externalities, positive externalities of biogas production, that the nutrients in the feedstock can be recycled. Then also ideally the price of the secondary product of anaerobic digestion, so the digestate biofertilizer, will go higher in the future, and will also then of course make it easier for producers to produce biogas by anaerobic digestion. And yeah, then the carbon price will need to go higher. So natural gas will also eventually become more expensive. Yeah, that's just, I would also invite everybody to read the latest Gas for Climate report, which takes also a look into the prices and also the production potential. There was another question about the production potential. So as I said, in billion cubic meters, somewhere around 100, in terawatt hours, it's something like 1,170, I think, if I remember right, according to the Gas for Climate report. But of course, there are also other reports from CE, RRE, and so on, having a look into this. So there are different studies on the potential, but according to our Gas for Climate, it's 1,170 by 2050 in Europe. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Susanna. And now I might suggest also to ask Mirella to answer two questions. So the one from Laszlo: electrolysis emits significant amount of oxygen to the atmosphere. How to the problem?
I would, yes, thank you, Pedro. I believe there are more other more interesting questions down, but I will try to get quickly to this first. Of course, we have a lot of research and innovation in electrolysis. So more than 100 million support, I would say. So I'm not aware of such a worrying effect of the hydrogen produced into the, or eliminated into the atmosphere. I take on board your comment. As I said, I'm a chemical engineer also by background, so I don't believe in what it's written there in the question. But as I said, we have sufficient support, and I would also recommend to Mr. Laszlo to go on and look at the results of our project, because like I said, I'm not aware of such an effect. There is also the question on the knowledge about transportation of hydrogen in liquid form. This is something that we have lately seen it coming, especially for heavy duty transportation. So far, we have worked mainly on compressed hydrogen when talking about using hydrogen for transportation. Yes, there is knowledge. Air Liquide, Linde, the well-known companies handling or dealing with hydrogen for decades, they know very well how to transport liquid hydrogen in big quantities. That's another question, and this is probably what we have to address soon. And finally, I would like to choose the question where it says that where can the renewable gases bring the highest contribution to climate change mitigation? And we know for sure that hydrogen will play an important role in sectors which are hard to decarbonize through renewable electricity. So we know very well that this is where renewable gases probably will bring the highest contribution, like energy intensive industries like steel, fertilizers, refineries. So really energy intensive industry, otherwise very hard to decarbonize through renewable electricity. So I don't know, there are many other questions, but I leave the others panelists to take also some of them. Thank you, Pedro.
Thank you, Mirella. Yes, we have a lot of questions. Maybe Costas, I wonder if you can choose, but here I have here one directly to you, asking you for the connection or the relation between EU taxonomy and the new issue that is being handled by the European Commission, the Energy System Integration Strategy.
Yes, thank you, Pedro. So so a couple of questions addressed to me and the Commission. Okay, I try to provide some answers. Of course, as I said from the beginning, we are several colleagues working on the topic. But anyway, I will try to provide some answers.
Can you speak?
So, yes, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you, Costas.
Yeah. So yes, as I said, I'm not the only one from DG Energy working on the topic. There are several colleagues working on gas. from different units. But in any case, I will try to provide some answers. So about taxonomy, and just to say, in general, what will be, let's say, some upcoming relevant legislative, let's say, initiatives that are linked to gas for the time being, of course. So in 2020, what we expect is, and also as Ilaria mentioned in the beginning, is of course the energy system integration, the smart integration, let's call it as it is in the European Green Deal strategy, communication, that will come out in a couple of weeks, and this will be accompanied by hydrogen, by a specific strategy on hydrogen. And then later in the year, we will have the debate on the new TENI regulation. So there again, the gas, let's say, as you may understand, the gas discussion will be very relevant. What will be, let's say, the future of gas for the upcoming financing period. So when it comes to taxonomy, indeed, as Mirella also mentioned, is a topic that we are looking, and is important to have a taxonomy of gases and to have clear definitions in the whole spectrum of the directives and the regulations when it comes to gas. Now, where this can be addressed, I don't think that this has been decided, but I think it can be, of course, in an amendment, a refinement of the renewables directive, together with some refinement of guarantees of origins. And other topics that are linked to renewables directive. It should be, of course, we should be, of course, insert some definition to the market-related directives and regulation. So I think it's a more horizontal issue. If it's, I saw a question if the taxonomy will be included in the upcoming strategy for hydrogen. This, I think, even if I knew, I couldn't say yes or no. I think I wouldn't be allowed, but I think that it will put more high-level topics rather than going into very specific taxonomies issues. And then I saw a question also about methane emission. This is a very valid topic. We are currently looking into this issue as well. Is a problem indeed for the present, but also possibly as for the future, as it was mentioned. And there again, we may see some legislative initiative. And I saw also a question which was a bit provocative in a way, how we can say that you are neutral. So how we can say that the Commission is neutral towards all technologies when we support offshore renewables. So there I would like to say that we are neutral, of course, in the context of the general EU policy. And I think the general EU policy and objectives are very clear. And our main objective is to have, to go towards and have a climate neutral economy in 2050. So in this context, all the initiatives that the Commission is proposing, and of course, all these initiatives are validated and adopted by the member states and the European Parliament, the Council and the European Parliament, are towards this objective and this option. I particularly referred, when I referred to neutrality, I referred mostly from my side to the market rules. So what we are trying to achieve also in the electricity system, but now also with the gas system and the gas sector, is to be technology neutral towards different actors and towards different resources and towards different production, if you wish, methods for gas. Of course, and these methods will have to prove themselves in the market. And then I think it's a separate discussion, the discussion on incentives or even subsidies that can be provided for kickstarting different markets. I think Ilaria very briefly referred to this topic, but this is a different topic. I referred to market rules, so access to the system, access to the distribution system. Currently, we don't have any rules for accessing the distribution system, but this might be indeed a barrier for the future resources for gas to access also the distribution system, to access the market, and how these markets will look like in the future. So these are the topics I referred. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kostas, for your clarifications. And well, we have to hand. I want to, Ilaria, you want to add something briefly, or we can? Okay, thank you very much. Then I pass the floor to Annegret. Thank you very much to conclude.
Yes, thank you, Pedro, and thank you all for the interesting discussion. I think it was really a great experience to see so many questions pop up. And I guess if we had anticipated this, we could have well filled another hour. So let me try to summarize. And I think a lot was said already by Kostas. I think the first, indeed, if we want to facilitate an environment where we also promote green gases and a European market for green gases, we need first thing a taxonomy. I think that is very important, and of course, let's say, which is part of a complete regulatory framework. And I think it was important what Ilaria mentioned, that it's not only the market rules, but it is the regulatory framework comprises more. But I also would not say that there is a distinction or that there is a contradiction between market rules and regulatory framework. Rather the opposite, as Kostas was pointing out. We need to have a system of access to markets, and that is maybe something which I missed in the discussion as a regulator. We haven't mentioned the word yet very often about the grid. And this is one of the very important parts that was only touched upon very briefly, that we need, and that has an important impact on the costs of decarbonization and on the transition towards a greener, let's call it a greener gas environment or greener gas sector. That is, in which way can the existing gas grid, which is of course shaped to transport natural gas, can it be reused, can it be refitted also for the transportation of renewable gases, of green gases, and what are the costs for this, and because we as regulators have always said that we want to have decarbonization at least cost, and I think that is an important element. And Pedro was already mentioning that we are looking also at the tariff implications that such a transition and a change in the underlying grid that might be necessary would have. But we also agree very much with the Commission, with Kostas, that this should happen in a market-based model, in a market-based approach, of course, with a clear regulatory framework complementing this market-based approach, or being part of this market-based approach. And of course, I think we have touched upon this also at several instances, that we need to see here and to have a whole system approach, which often is also called sector coupling or even sector integration. I think that is a lesson that we have to learn, and that we also touched upon here, that we cannot see electricity and gas and transport, etc., in separate boxes anymore. The linkages are too strong, and a successful decarbonization can be achieved only with a whole sector approach, or in other words, a sector integration that pulls together. And of course, for this, there must be a technological neutral approach to create a level playing field, so that we can have the different sources, the different green sources acting in an environment that then can bring out and realize the benefits of scale, as was mentioned by Susanna. I think that is an important part here, that we are at the beginning of the process, and we must also fit in this environment a technological neutrality approach and an approach that pushes technological innovation, so that is innovation friendly, and in order to bring down the costs in the end, so that we are in a system that can realize all these benefits for the benefit of the consumers, who can take an informed choice and who do not pay unnecessarily high prices due to an inefficiently designed regulatory framework. I think that is something that we need to take into account as well, and to promote here. And we, as was mentioned also by Pedro, as CER, as regulators, are working on input to the sector integration proposals that are coming. We have already submitted a brief response to the consultation of the Commission. We are continuing this work from a regulatory perspective, of course, to bring into the system all these, and on the table all these aspects that I have mentioned. And one of our key points also in 2021 will be the work on green gases, on renewable gases, and you can find this in our draft work program for 2021, which is under consultation until the end of July. And we have also mentioned, and maybe that is the two last elements that I want to mention, that these aspects need to feed in also in another important piece of legislation that is being currently reviewed by the Commission. That is the review of the 10E regulation. And if we want to have a grid that is suitable also to transport renewable and green gases, then also the criteria for sustainability need to feed into this 10E regulation, and of course into the definition of what a project of common interest is in the future. I think that is important. And we made the link, and that was touched upon here as well, also to the taxonomy for sustainable finance that is currently also already being consulted, and where the proposal where a first proposal is out. And I think we need to have, there was one question, we need to have in fact one taxonomy, and we need to have it from, let's say, linking the different sides and the different aspects of it. So finance needs to, the sustainable finance needs to follow roughly the same criteria as the criteria that we establish for the taxonomy that was introduced by and presented by Ilaria at the beginning. So in order to channel investment into a sustainable grid, let me call that, is that can transport and is fit for the energy transition, we need to have these criteria on this side as well, on the asset side, if I may say so, as well as on the financing side. So the two must go together, and I think that is something that we need to keep together. And we have, let's say, called this the whole system approach, looking at the various aspects from one regulatory perspective to bring together the different sides, so that we are not having contradictions, for example, in electricity tariffs and gas tariffs, etc., but that we bring this together in one overall consistent approach. So I think that is what we can learn, and what I wanted to also say from the regulatory perspective here. And I think this discussion was very useful in terms to bring us further into this discussion and to linking the different approaches and aspects that are on the table into one piece of legislation in the end. So I think that the Commission has a lot to consider when preparing the sector integration as well, sector integration strategy, as well as the other initiatives that are currently being discussed, in particular also the 10E revision. So with this, I would like to thank you all again for attending and for all the questions and the active participation. And I guess I hand back to Ilaria for closing.
Just for a final closing. Thank you very much, Annegret, for drawing the conclusions in a very clear manner, and also giving a further perspective. Thank you very much to all the panelists for the participation, for help in organizing this joint webinar with SEER and AIB. Thank you very much for all your support along the way. And I would like to thank finally my director, Jean-Michel, for being with us until the very end, and all my colleagues from the online team for providing all the necessary support to this interesting webinar. Hope to hear soon from you. For any questions, we are here. Thanks a lot.